What is up, you guys? This is JP, and in this video we're going to talk about adding sets to increase volume. So even though I like learning about fitness, I'm obviously not going to be right on everything. And one of the things that I I've read somewhere, and it was in Eric Helms's strength training pyramid book, and I'm definitely not trying to throw his name in here. He did not say this in black and white. I took it and kind of ran with it, and this is definitely my fault. But that's where I first heard it, was adding sets week to week within a mesocycle of training to increase volume over the training block. To my knowledge, Dr. Mike Israetel is from Renaissance Periodization, is a very big advocate of adding sets throughout the mesocycle. So if you have a block of training, you add sets for a muscle group week to week to increase volume over that mesocycle. Again, volume, and I'm sure your guys' ears are bleeding for me saying this pretty much every video, has a dose-response relationship with hypertrophy to an extent. So again, if you intelligently increase volume over your entire training career for a muscle and everything else is good, you know, food, sleep, all that good stuff, then you're going to get a bigger muscle, you know, and it sounds simpler than that, but in this circumstance, I'm gonna keep it that simple. But one thing, and I used to think that adding sets week to week, you know, going from, let's just say you're doing pull-ups or push-ups, and you start off with 3 sets for chest, which include push-ups for week 1. We'll just talk about push-ups to keep it simple. And then week 2, you go to 4 sets. And week 3, you go to 5 sets of push-ups. And week 4, you go to 6 sets. And week 5, you go to 7 sets, a lot of numbers. And week 6, you go to 8 sets of push-ups. So essentially between week 1 and week 6, you've more than doubled your set of push-ups. You went from 3 sets to 8 sets. And again, while increasing volume intelligently over your training career should be the goal if your goal is hypertrophy, there's some problems with this. And again, I used to be a big advocate of this. I'm sure I've talked about doing that on one of my videos, and in some circumstances that's still okay. But recently I've kind of had, after reading, you know, some stuff on 3DMJ website, it's a really good resource, you guys should check it out. Reading some articles on there, talking with some people in the mass community group for the research review that I follow, and just looking at a few things, I kind of don't think that's the best way to add volume anymore. And there's a few reasons. Is one, like the push-up example I gave, it could be push-ups or pull-ups or any exercise, volume is increasing at a very rapid rate. Okay, so you're essentially going from 3 to 8 sets or whatever it is, how many sets you start with and how many sets you end with per muscle group, which is gonna be a huge percentage increase of volume. So looking at it now that I think about that, that's kind of a very big jump, and that jump might not be large enough that you can kind of acclimate to it and kind of reap all the benefits of that volume over that block. So that large increase from week 1 to whatever ending week you have might be too big of an increase of volume. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I don't think adding sets week to week is a good idea anymore. And I'm kind of rethinking my mindset against that. The second thing is, originally I thought that was a good idea because, you know, when you're slowly adding volume like that, well, again, it's not that slow, but when you're adding 1 set per week, that because of the repeated bout effect, you know, because of the increased work capacity, you're gonna make more gains from that volume. But one other note about that too that I kind of not liking is that you're spending a portion of the block, depending on how you structure it, doing too little volume, and then you're spending a portion of the block probably overreaching a little bit. So pretty much essentially only the middle of the block where you have the optimal set range for you is where you're kind of getting the most gains, in my opinion, now that I think about it. So essentially you got to think, should you increase sets week to week, or should you keep sets consistent or roughly consistent throughout the block, throughout the training block? And if you've already found the amount of sets that works well for you to gain muscle, let's just say you've done training for a while for yourself and you're like, you know what, I respond really well to like 16 sets per week on chest, you know, for me. So why not just stay at 16 sets per week per chest throughout the entire training block? And for those of you who are smart and think, well, okay, well, that's a lot of sets to increase from a deload from before the training block all the way up to 16 sets per week. That's a big jump right there. You're going from a deload to 16 sets per week. Fine, but that's something that a simple intro week can do. And I've talked about this like 4 or 5 videos ago, adding an intro week. Or I think, I don't know if it was 4 or 5 videos ago, but I talked about adding an intro week to kind of acclimate you to that new level of volume that you're gonna do for your next training block. So if your deload, you had 8 sets per chest for that week, and your training block you have 16 sets, you could have an intro week where you bridge that gap with 12 sets on chest for that week. So that kind of acclimates you with the repeated bout effect a little bit, and just doesn't make delayed onset muscle soreness a little too high. So again, so when you're looking at should I increase sets or keep them static, I kind of think keeping them static is a better idea for those reasons that I just mentioned. Now some of you are like, okay, well then how do I increase volume? Well, like the whole previous video I did about RPEs, you should essentially have rep ranges, and you should have a proximity to failure tied to that rep range, and that's how I like to dictate load. So if you have a rep range of 8 to 15 reps, or 8 to 12 reps, for example, and you have it programmed into a 6 to an 8 RPE, or what essentially means 2 to 4 reps in reserve, then you're going to pick a load that lets you fall on that rep range of 8 to 12, that when you stop in that rep range, 10 reps, for example, you end up having between 2 and 4 reps in the tank. So essentially the RPE is auto-regulating the load automatically. So again, RPE based on repetitions in reserve is a form of auto-regulation. So if you have that same example, 8 to 12 reps at a 6 to 8 RPE every single week, for example, you should be adapting to those previous weeks, getting the gains from those weeks, and you should automatically be increasing load to stay within that RPE range. If you kept load the same every single week, eventually you're gonna have too low of an RPE. One week you're gonna try to you're gonna get to the rep range, you're gonna get to the top of it, you're gonna get to 12 reps, and you're gonna think, well, I have like 6 reps left in the tank, which means you're not following the RPE. So in a sense, RPE and rep ranges take care of themselves. And with that increase in load for the exercise you're doing, it could be anything. It could be, any exercise, squats, bench press. You're increasing volume automatically. Now, this increase in volume is not as much as adding a whole set week to week. But again, in my opinion, that's better because you don't want huge, giant jumps, by simply adding sets. So you are increasing volume and more intelligently, in my opinion, when letting RPE and rep ranges dictate the load. One final note on that is that when you're doing this too, you're also getting stronger versus just adding sets. When you add sets week to week, it's very hard to also increase the load on the bar that you're using. So think about going from 3 sets on bench press to 8 sets on bench press by week 6, and you're also trying to add load to the bar. That is a very quick recipe to overtraining, overreaching, or overtraining. So when you're not adding sets and you're keeping that static rep range and RPE, and you're letting that auto-regulate the load, you're getting stronger, you're making more intelligent volume increases, and you're making gains that way as well. And when all is said and done, I'd rather someone not overtrain versus training a little bit on the underside, and that's just my opinion. It still shouldn't be easy training though. If you guys have any questions, comments, leave them down below. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.